A little bit over a year ago, I made a video about a 1997 gaming PC, which had amazing reception and is still to this day the most viewed video on my channel. Here's a little refresher on the specs of this PC. As you can see, it's missing one particular part, which was sort of the main idea behind the video. But today, we're going to remedy that. Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to be putting this video card into that PC. Now, these video cards actually are selling for quite a lot on the used market, and I wasn't going to spend that much money on an almost 30-year-old video card. Thankfully, I got really lucky and I got a great deal on this card. If you follow me on Twitch, you know what I'm talking about. It's a deal of a lifetime. I could not pass it up, and I saw a lot of potential for this video. I bought this card not knowing if it functions or not, but thankfully it actually turned out to be working perfectly. And as you can see, it's actually going to be a perfect match for a 1997 PC. However, the warranty sticker does mention February 1998. I was always interested in trying out one of these cards. It's just that I really wasn't going to pay as much as the used market is asking for one of these. We're going to be pairing up the card with the original ATI Rage Pro Turbo video card as the main video card in the AGP slot, and this is going to be our expansion card. Unfortunately, making this video, I had a lot of technical difficulties, not just with the card, but in general, so many things went wrong. For instance, my hard drive that I recorded all my footage on while streaming has crashed without me knowing, and I was just desperate to try and save every last minute of video from a hard drive that was rated 0% by a diagnostic tool. So there could be some issues with the video here and there. I apologize for any technical difficulties. Also, the video kept desyncing during editing because the video files were an absolute mess, but I was thankfully able to recover most of the footage and use it for this video because I really didn't want to re-record all of that. It was also very difficult to get some of the games working. I thought it would be a lot more straightforward using a 3DFX card than it really is. It is actually quite jank, and I had to keep switching between drivers, back and forth. Some DOS games wouldn't work right away. I would have to download patches and stuff, so it was a bit of a hassle, but yeah, got there in the end. Oh yeah, one last thing. I had a weird issue with my setup. At first I thought there was something wrong with the video card, but it turned out it was actually a USB 2.0 card on the same PCI bus as this video card that was causing some graphical issues with the card. It makes no sense to me, but somehow the USB card was causing issues with this video card. But once I removed it, it was working perfectly. So without any further ado, let's shove this card into the PC and let's see how it does. And I'm going to start out with one of the most interesting games in the list of games I'm going to be trying today. And that is because this game I was not able to play with 3D acceleration because it only contains 3DFX Voodoo support with the Glide API. There's no direct 3D. So this is actually the first time I'm playing NFS 2 with 3D acceleration. It's really cool. It runs great, and it's amazing how much better it looks than software rendering. It doesn't even feel like the same game. I have to apologize about the audio. It seems like I may have recorded the audio twice, so it might sound a little weird sometimes, but yeah, that's just one of the technical difficulties I had making this video, so I apologize for that. Next up, we have another game that was in the original video. This is Star Wars Shadows of the Empire. Now, this one actually doesn't have a 3DFX glide mode. We're just using Direct 3D. But my video card particularly is actually one of the only ones that is supported. This is the original 1.0 release, so it doesn't have the extra patch on it that adds support to newer video cards. And it seems to work great. I mean, no issues so far. I feel the Voodoo 1 is also probably more optimal for this game than a Voodoo 2. With the Voodoo 2 you may be running into issues because this game was actually designed to be run at about 3 FPS because it's a Nintendo 64 game originally. So running it at 60 FPS is gonna probably cause some issues within the gameplay, but seems to be getting around 30 FPS here, and it runs pretty nicely, and it's super playable. Next up, we have a game that surprisingly worked without any issues whatsoever. Pod is kind of notorious for just being the game that's really difficult to get working properly. And this PC just seems to be the perfect match for it. I was getting some slowdowns with the original video cards back in the day when I did the first video, but this time it seems to be running great. And we have the dream team of not only a 3DFX Voodoo card, but also an Intel Pentium MMX. So we have the combination version of Intel Pentium MMX and Voodoo card version installed, which you actually have to choose during the installation. Probably one of the most impressive improvements I've seen is with Formula 1. If you remember originally, this one I had to put it on the low settings, and it was still slowing down quite a bit. I believe it was around 15 to 20 FPS. And I remember this is one of those games that had ATI CIF support, but it was definitely not running as well as it does with 3DFX Voodoo. And this is also Monaco, which is the most demanding track that you can pick. Here I actually had to pause the game for a couple seconds just to register what just happened, where we entered the tunnel and Murray Walker, the commentator, also suddenly had an echo, which kind of gives you the impression that he's actually sitting on the top of the car commentating, just shouting into our ears, which I love. After spending a considerable amount of time in the name entry screen trying out all kinds of profanities to see what gets blocked in this game, I quickly realized that we're actually not using the Voodoo card. For some reason it just automatically selected the ATI Rage Pro Turbo card, and I had to go and swap out the video drivers so that the Voodoo card would get recognized. This is going to be a returning theme. I was constantly switching back and forth between drivers, because some games work better with some drivers and others with other drivers. It's just a real mess. This game doesn't have Voodoo support, it's all Direct 3D. Actually, the reason I got this game was also because it has S3D support, which is interesting, but yeah. Here it is in Direct 3D mode. You can see it looks a lot smoother than with the ATI card. So even if you're just playing Direct 3D games, the Voodoo will look better than the ATI, just because it supports a lot more stuff, a lot more effects than the ATI does. So the image overall just looks a lot smoother. Next, I was actually quite surprised, but you can actually get DOS games to work in Windows, and with the 3DFX support as well, which I thought would only work in DOS, but apparently it's actually functional in Windows as well. So here's GTA 1 running in Windows, and yeah, it's definitely the 3DFX version. This is where I actually realized that I ran into a problem where with a certain driver I've disabled VSync, and then I switched to another driver and that didn't even allow me to enable VSync, so I'm not sure if it was supposed to be on by default or off, but certain Voodoo drivers just don't allow you to use VSync at all. So that was a bit of a surprise. But here's the game running in DOS mode instead. Didn't really have any issues with this game, even on the original video card. However, I've never actually played GTA with 3DFX before, and that's the only acceleration mode you can choose, so it was kind of an interesting experience, because really the only way you can play this game without a Voodoo card is just in software renderer mode. And while I do prefer the low color version of this game, like I said in the original video, it was still a cool experience. Now for another classic, Tomb Raider. And if you remember, this game also has a ATI CIF patch, and that's what I used in the original video. And now I'm using obviously the 3DFX patch, which I think I did have to download separately. It didn't come with the game. The game looks great. However, I still stick to what I said in the original video. Namely, the fact that I think the game looks a little bit better with the ATI CIF patch, just because I think the textures look a bit sharper. When you're using this card, you actually don't get any graphics settings at all. I don't even think you can change the resolution. It's just stuck at 640 by 480. So that was a bit weird. But I definitely prefer the CIF look for this game. It's just, yeah, textures look a bit better. It looks a little bit less muddy. But yeah, looks like the frame rate is just pegged at 30 FPS, so it's looking good. Let's stay in DOS for a little bit longer, and here's Carmageddon, which I had some trouble getting to work because this one didn't need a patch. It originally had 3DFX support in it, but I just could not get it to work. Turns out I had to copy a driver file into the game folder. I believe it was a Glide OVL file that had to be copied into the folder, but it had to be the right driver version as well, because if you don't use the right one, it will not work. It's a little bit of a jank setup. I was kind of expecting 3DFX to just work out of the box in every game that supports it, but the reality is actually quite different, and you have to fiddle around with stuff quite a bit in drivers and such. The game runs great, and it definitely looks way better than software renderer mode, so if I'm gonna be playing Carmageddon, this is definitely the way to do it. And this is one of the games that you really can only play with a Voodoo card, and that's why I think having a Voodoo 1 is probably the most, the Voodoo 1 is definitely the most useful card you can have, because all of these old DOS games are actually impossible to get working without, in 3D accelerated mode, without a Voodoo card, because wrappers won't work with DOS games unless you're using some kind of an emulator. Another game that will only be 3D accelerated on a Voodoo card is Screamer 2 right here, also known as Bleifuss 2. This one I had to download the 3DFX patch for, again, just like with Tomb Raider. And for good measure, also here's Screamer Rally. Now this one actually supports 3DFX cards out of the box. It's one of the only DOS games that I had 3DFX support by default. But it's from 1997, so I guess at that point they figured they would just put it in the game right away. And yeah, never played it with again, like a lot of these games are just I've played them before, but never played them with 3D acceleration before, so it was really cool to experience. It just kind of transforms the game into something else, and this is really, like I said, where the Voodoo shines is DOS games. Now let's check out some newer games. By newer, I mean newer than 1997. And here's the sequel to the game that we checked out not too long ago, Carmageddon 2. This one I played a lot as a kid. And this is one of those weird games that I believe it came out in '98, and it did have both 3DFX support with Glide API and also Direct 3D. But the weird thing is that if you're using Direct 3D, you can't actually change the resolution. But if you're using Glide, then you can. I don't really know why. I don't know what the reason for that is, or if it's just like a programming error, or they just didn't think it would be possible with video cards at the time. I'm not sure. This is kind of a demanding game, so it doesn't run perfectly, but it runs good enough. And yeah, this is the Glide mode, obviously. And this is actually one of those games where oftentimes people would just use a wrapper for, even back in the day. People would just use DG Voodoo or some other type of Glide wrapper, and then the reason for this would be, like I said, you'd be able to change the resolution. Obviously, Voodoo 1 isn't really fast enough, so we're just doing 640 by 480, but this is the resolution you'd be using normally anyways. And now for some Unreal. Here you can see the settings on the screen, and I'm going to be running the demo loop here just for a little bit to see the frame rate, and then we're going to switch over to some gameplay.
early morning run through Baker's Canyon.
Now for a game that actually required a newer driver than what I had installed at the time. For this game, I believe I just installed the latest driver, but the latest driver didn't work with every older game, so I had to keep switching back and forth. This one's running in 640 by 480 and has built-in glide support. With the older driver, I believe it just said something like you can't, I don't know, it was like expecting a different VXD file, so it was expecting a newer driver, I believe. But with that newer driver, for example, Star Wars Shadows of the Empire didn't work because it just did not recognize that there was a Voodoo video card at all. This one is also a Nintendo 64 port, just like Shadows of the Empire, but this one seems to work fine at higher frame rates.
I'm clear, but my micro's out. Nice work, Rogue Squadron. We might make a name for ourselves after all.
Now for everyone's favorite, Half-Life from 1998. This one seems to run pretty good. Mind you, I didn't have VSync on, obviously that's why we're getting screen tearing here. And I had no way of turning it back on either because the driver I was using at the time, I think it came with one of the games. One of the games had the driver on it. And so that's what I used, and yeah, didn't let me turn VSync back on. Yeah, totally playable on this machine.
I wonder if I should run that test again. Ah, Gordon, here you are. We just sent the sample down to the test chamber.
Now for a game that didn't work at all, I tried to play some Croc. I guess I should have installed an older driver or newer driver, or I don't even know at this point, but again, it's just another game I couldn't get to work, and I just couldn't be bothered installing another driver just for one game, so yeah. And then also this one didn't work either, which is Hitman. It's probably a little bit too new, being from 2000. It probably requires a newer video card. But what worked was GTA 2, and in glide mode. Now this game has a direct 3D support, so you're not really getting like a huge benefit from using glide. I mean, obviously it's going to run a little bit better. It's going to require less resources from the CPU side, but other than that, I mean, it's just good old GTA 2. Seems to work great.
Machine gun, armor.
To all of you explosively minded idiots out there, I just want to say, every single Thursday, I get bombs, I get all kinds of bombs, except bombs in my pet. Magnet, you just can't avoid. Right on! You need that. This all-terrain pickup or market. More pulling power than any other truck in its That boy's a wonder truck. Oh, yeah.
Now for a similar game, but in full 3D. One of my favorite games from back in the day, Midtown Madness. You can see the settings on the screen. And this one's actually a very demanding game, but seems to be working really good on this card. I did have to swap drivers again, I believe, to get it to work. It definitely looks way better than it did on the ATI card. While this one only has direct 3D support, it doesn't have glide. It looks great. And I was very surprised with the performance because, like I said, this is actually a very demanding game. In fact, the only other game that's even more demanding than this one would be probably Midtown Madness 2, the sequel. And this one also only has direct 3D support.
Now is the time to take out the map.
And as expected, it doesn't run as well as the first game did. In fact, it's very, very choppy. But this is an insanely demanding game. I mean, if you remember a couple months ago, I did a video on a Pentium 4 that I was overclocking from 2.4 to 2.8 gigahertz. And even the 2.8 gigahertz Pentium 4 was brought down to its knees by this game. It's insane how demanding this game is. I mean, there's a lot going on in here, so it's not surprising, but yeah. You honestly, for like solid 60 FPS in this game, you'd probably need at least an Athlon 64, maybe even a Core 2 Duo. So let's check out the other Need for Speed games. We looked at Need for Speed 2, and then 3 came out in '98. Quite a bit more detailed and more demanding than the second game, but still runs great on this machine. Actually, I was surprised how well it ran. This also has direct 3D support, but as you could see in the previous video, on this card it was a little bit more jank looking, a little bit more rough around the edges, because it's just, you know, the ATI card simply lacks a couple features like texture filtering and such. So this game definitely looks way better on the 3DFX card. And let's go chronologically. The next game is Need for Speed 4, also known as High Stakes or Road Challenge, I believe, in Europe. A couple of settings had to be turned down because it wasn't running great, all maxed out, but I think it still looks good and runs great.
Three, two, one, go!
So pretty impressive. It's a 1999 game, so this is definitely pushing it, and it's still handling it really well. Although it's not quite optimal, and I wouldn't want to play it on this PC. I would play it on something faster, of course, but it's still cool to see. then last but not least, we have my favorite Need for Speed game on PC, which is Need for Speed Porsche 2000, or Porsche Unleashed in America. I decided to put the car lighting setting to medium because it didn't seem to take a lot of resources, but it looked a little bit better than with a flat shaded car. Now this game is way beyond what the card is capable of, yet it still put up quite a fight, and it actually looks really good. I mean, it's on low settings except for the reflections, and it's playable. It's not perfect. And let's not forget that also we're running on a 275 megahertz CPU, so some of it might be down to that CPU as well, because this game can slow down even on like a 1 gigahertz Pentium 3. Having 275 megahertz is not helping, but yeah, it still looks great and runs well. And that's about wraps up this video. To summarize my feelings about this card, I have mixed feelings about the card. I'm very happy that I finally got to experience the quote-unquote voodoo magic, as people call it. It was something I've never experienced before. I mean, I never had a card like this, and I've never had the opportunity to play on one, so it was quite an interesting experience. I would have never paid as much as they're asking for these cards, and if I hadn't gotten this insane deal on it, then I would have probably never done so either, because yeah, every time I see these cards, they're always just going for way too much. I just don't feel like paying that much for something that's, you know, this old. Something that's about 30 years old should cost you around, you know, $100+. But that's just the way it goes. I mean, that's I guess retro hardware prices are only gonna start going up instead of going down as you know, more stuff is being sold and more stuff gets destroyed and such. But anyways, the Voodoo experience was a bit of a mixed bag, because I sort of had this perception, or this idea that if you have a Voodoo card, then all you need to do is you're all set. You just put the card in there, and then every game is like, oh yes, a Voodoo card, that's good. Okay, here you go, glide on. But it was actually a lot more difficult than that. I mean, a lot of the times I had to download patches, I had to keep switching the driver. Some games don't even come with 3D effect support that's supposed to have it, like say Whiplash in North America does have 3D effect support, but then Fatal Racing, which is the European version, didn't get the 3D effect support apparently, so that was kind of weird. There were just outright some games I could not even include. One of them being, well, you saw what happened with Croc 2, but which was even weirder was I tried to include Interstate 76, which I did play in the previous video. However, I was completely unable to figure out how to put it in glide mode. I was just thinking maybe I have a version that doesn't have glide mode, because every time I tried googling it, people were just saying, oh, just click on glide mode, just play in glide mode, just use the glide mode. But I only had direct 3D mode, so there's no glide mode in my version. So yeah, that's a bit of a weird one. I just didn't feel like getting another version of the game just to be able to test it. Maybe in a later video we'll look at it, but this video has gone on for long enough. Anyways, that about wraps up this video. Hope you enjoyed it, and if you have any suggestions or you'd like to see a game featured, I might make some more gameplay videos in the future, just showcasing games on this machine. I'm also hoping to just branch out a little bit and provide some live streams on this YouTube channel, and hopefully more videos in the future. I got some videos cooking and hope I can get those done soon. Thanks for watching, and catch you later.